All right, let's get this party started. Today, we're going to talk about African and Asian nations in the Cold War context. There's a pre reading in Kaplan, just about a page and a half, one on ideology and the other on Iran. The major vocab on ideology is this non aligned movement. Okay, and I also want you to learn about Mohammad Reza Pahlavi and the Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran. Okay, so let's get rid of this laser pointer. By the end of this session, you're due for a DBQ intro and body paragraph. And you can find that on our Google Classroom page. Everybody's going to submit their own, and I'll give you feedback and a grade. Okay, so let's set the stage. So we've been talking about the Cold War, and we've talked about three cases: the intervention in Europe, Cuba, and Vietnam. And today we're going to go to this big gray area, this African and Asian sphere of the Cold War. The Cold War was a global phenomenon, but what did it mean for African and South Asian and Middle Eastern nations? We're going to look at a few cases, particularly the cases of Iran and the cases of African nations in the non-aligned movement, with pictures like this one and pictures like this one as Iran led a revolution. And I like talking about Iran because just about a month ago, or maybe 2 months ago, the USA was threatening to go to war with Iran. You probably were nervous that you were going to be drafted into World War III. And here's a picture of Iran's former president with some scary ideas around it. So I hope you're a little bit more interested now in learning about the history of Iran and the non-aligned movement. Okay, so today we're going to put the Iran story together with the non-aligned movement story in the context of the Cold War, and thereby create multiple stories of how people responded to the Cold War. It wasn't just proxy wars and the USA getting angry at Soviet proxies. There was a lot of other stuff going on. So we're going to do that by investigating the responses of Iranians, Indians, and Africans to American and Soviet pressures. Okay, the way it's going to work, I'm going to give background to Iran with a timeline. Then we're going to go to pictures, an Edpuzzle video, and a lecture on the 1979 revolution. And then you're going to dive into a DBQ about the experiences of Iranians and Africans in the Cold War. So let's get started, okay? When we talk about Iran, we've talked about it a lot before, actually. You just probably don't recognize it. You talked about Iran last year when we talked about the Persian Empire. We talked about them this year with a lesson on the Safavid Empire back in November in our chapter on gunpowder empires. And today we're going to talk about Iran and some of its main characters, the Shah and the Ayatollah during the 20th century. Okay, here's a timeline. Why don't you take a look at it real quick, and then I'll narrate some of my thoughts. The question is kind of, how would you describe Iran as we get ready for them to face off against the United States? So like I said, back in ninth grade, Iran was the Persian Empire, and they had these really powerful kings like Cyrus the Great and Darius the Great. And they called themselves the King of Kings. So what we've got here are really powerful rulers and a really ancient civilization. Then around the Yellow Periodization, in the 7th century, Arab invaders took over Iran and began caliphates there. So we recognize that Iran is part of the story of the spread of Islam. And it was a Shia Muslim place as opposed to a Sunni Muslim place, and that set it up for later conflict. About 1,000 years later, Iran was ruled by the Safavid dynasty, and that was during the Gunpowder Empire period, and they were rivals with other empires in the Middle East, like the Ottomans and the Mughals. So we see this culture of really strong Muslim leaders who have a lot of pride in their civilization. During the 1800s, during the Orange period, British and Russian troops fought over Iran and tried to control their economy. So that makes Iran similar to a lot of other places we've looked at, like Cuba and Vietnam, right? They were kind of tools of core countries during the 1800s and 1900s that's going to set them up to be angry in the Red periodization. Then in the Red period, after World War II, the USA supported a dictator in Iran, and his name was the Shah. And we're going to show some pictures of him in the video, but he was American-backed, and he overthrew the Iranian government, and he was not nice to his own people. He tried to westernize them. He used a secret police to get rid of his opponents. And so in that sense, he reminds us of Fulgencio Batista in Cuba as an American puppet looking to squash opposition. And that's going to lead to a revolution. Now, Iran's revolution was led by a guy named Ayatollah Khomeini, and his revolution was an Islamic revolution. He led a revolt in the name of Islam. So that's what we're going to make come alive the rest of the way. So he has some similarities to Castro in Cuba, sticking it to the Americans, but also maybe a different goal. Okay, and now we're going to go to a video from an Oscar-winning movie that makes this Iranian revolution come alive a little bit more. And the video is called Argo. And you're going to leave this PowerPoint, like I'm going to do now, and go to Edpuzzle. Which should be in my Google Chrome somewhere. Well, whatever. You're going to go to Edpuzzle, and you're going to watch that video. And so you can pause my recording here. And then you'll come back and I'll talk a little bit more about Ayatollah Khomeini. So here's the Ayatollah. And in 1979, he made a lot of news by overthrowing the Shah and ordering a bombardment of the American embassy in the Iranian capital. And here you can see fans of the Ayatollah burning American flags. And since 1979, since that Iranian revolution, Iran has been an Islamic republic. So they use Islamic law as the law of the land. And they're Shia, so they're against Sunni states like Saudi Arabia. And they're also very much against the United States because the United States backed the Shah and he was the bad guy in the Islamic Revolution. And so that creates an ongoing rivalry between the USA and Iran. And so it's on you, students, to put that in the context of the Cold War. How does it make the United States look? What does it show about the rest of the world and their reaction to the United States? Okay, so we opened with what we're doing today. We looked at a timeline of Iran. We talked about the 1979 revolution, and now we're going to flip it to you. There is a DBQ online with 5 documents about reactions by Africans and Asians to US and Soviet efforts to extend their power. And once you read those documents and put them in groups, you can put together an intro with context about the Cold War and a thesis about what Asians and Africans did, and then a body paragraph making it come alive a little bit more. In order to support you, I have a couple of exemplars from our break packet. So here's Anissa's from first period. You can check that out. Now, what I really like about Anissa's work is the way that she takes several sentences to elaborate on her start. So she starts with the Industrial Revolution, and then she talks about why that led to class conflict and why that class conflict led to the Mexican and Russian revolutions before she goes to her thesis statement here. So nice job, Anissa. I think for this, well, no, I shouldn't tell you where to start your intro, but I'm here for you if you want to run anything by me. And then here's a body paragraph from Jamali in first period. And what I wanted to show was Jamali's sequence in citing a document and then tying it to the prompt and then doing a sourcing analysis. So let's check that out real quick. So I'll do my laser pointer. So you can see that she starts by summarizing a document, saying this guy has legal rights, and then she ties it to the prompt. This is an example of allowing people in Mexico to have control over their land instead of the government having control over it. And that totally echoes her claim up here. And then she does a sourcing analysis. This document may be exaggerated. The writer was a political leader and was writing to a revolutionary leader, so he may go against what Zapata believes, because revolutionaries don't usually agree with the government and its leaders. So she's highlighting how the author's purpose and point of view affects what he says. And then she takes the document and contrasts it to the Russia document. And by doing that, she answers the prompt. So your job is to write a body paragraph about how Asians and Africans reacted to American pressures during the Cold War. So you should say constantly, this was a reaction to an American pressure because. Okay, I'll leave it to you. I'm here for you if you want support over text or Google Classroom. And I miss you. Hope you're all doing okay.